This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
Telepathy is perhaps the best attested of all psychical phenomena. Valeria Teles interviews Logan Yonavjak, the author of The Parapsychology Revolution, a concise anthology of paranormal and psychical research. Logan Yonavjak is a financial service professional, author, angel investor, teacher, and healer. She focused on building businesses and guiding capital in ways that regenerate our social, environmental, and economic systems to advance a more holistic future for all. Embedded in this work is a passion for promoting tools that can bring people greater access to their own power and into greater self-alignment. Logan's work in financial services involves working with family offices to educate and connect them to investments in regenerative natural resources through her firm, Provenance Capital Group. She has also developed new financial models and tools, particularly focused on land conservation and restoration, and has written extensively about how to invest for people, planet, and profit. Logan also advises a variety of impact-oriented startups. Additionally, she offers a range of healings, meditation techniques, and other tools that have helped her tap into greater sources of energetic connection and understanding of her purpose. As a financial service professional, she feels that these have taken her beyond many other tools she's worked with in the past and helped her to become a more aligned leader and aware professional. Logan holds numerous certifications through the Modern Mystery School. She also holds a Master's of Forestry from the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, an MBA from the Yale School of Management, and a BA from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Meet Logan at LoganYonavjak.com. Here is the interview with Logan Yonavjak.
In your own words, who is Logan Yonavjak?
I am a healer, teacher, author, financial services professional, and divine being and human being.
What is the divine, Logan, to you?
I think it's a field of ever-evolving consciousness that we're all embedded in and part of, that never ends, and that we are all able to participate in every moment.
Some people believe in a destination like heaven or finally getting somewhere. Mm-hmm. Did you have these ideas before?
I think that there's many places consciousness can go. So I think that there are different dimensions of experience and that we can direct ourselves to different layers of consciousness while we're alive, as we cross over into other forms of existence, as our souls progress. But, I think there's just infinite number of possibilities.
How did you come to this understanding about life?
Well, I think it's been an evolving process. When I was growing up, my father was very interested in consciousness development, and he inspired me to think about telepathy and some of the other faculties that are kind of beyond what most people talk about. Right. And so I think as a kid, he would do things like have me guess how, like, to the second, how fast I was going to run something. And, or we would have experiences where I would respond to him, but he hadn't said anything, so I think those were early experiences I had. And then definitely tuning into different energetic experiences over time. I meditated early on in my life and had some of those experiences. Definitely feeling connected to other people, sometimes more than others, and feeling kind of entangled with them at a distance. So I think a lot of those personal experiences opened me up. And then I got more interested in more formal ways that people were trying to tune in, aggregate, and share bigger data sets around people having these experiences.
My other warm-up question is about the purpose of the human experience. What do you think that is?
I think the purpose of the human experience is to learn some particular lessons that come with being in a physical body and having, in the Kabbalistic teachings, existing in Malkuth. Like if we look at the path of the flaming sword that comes down from the supernals in the Kabbalistic teachings, the kind of final resting place in many ways is Malkuth, which is the dense, the physical. This is in many ways the densest experience a creative being can have. And then we start flowing back up to our divine kind of like expansive consciousness again. So I think we kind of go back and forth between all possibility and then dense reality. And it's all just to kind of keep learning and exploring and growing.
Do we choose to what lessons we will take part, or it just happens?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I think I've heard many versions of, people think, but I don't have a strong opinion on how much we predestine our lessons. Right. I certainly think we can be active participants in choosing our lessons while we're here, but how much we decide on that ahead of time, I don't really have a strong opinion around.
My question to you is, what is spirituality and how is it different from religion?
Well, I think we're all, like, as I said, divine creative beings. And so I think we're, the spirit is sort of that expansive consciousness that exists all around us at all times and we're part of that creative element. And then I think religion is human beings' attempt at taking some of those lessons and putting them into doctrine and kind of rules and systems around spirituality. Yeah. And so I think it's more like human governance systems and attempts at, and I think it can go into, positive directions. I think sometimes giving people structure is good, and then it can go into negative directions as well if it becomes too dogmatic.
Do you ever use the word God?
I prefer not to. I think it's fine, and I love the word, but I think there's many words for God. And also in the Kabbalistic teachings, there's a different word for God in each Sephiroth in the Tree of Life. So I think there's many, many faces of God. But in terms of like the broadest sense possible, I like to think of it as divine consciousness.
Is there such a thing as being healed?
I think ultimately we're having different experiences and, in many ways, the experience of being in physical form, there's dynamic tension going on that shows up as experiences of suffering, but that kind of at a meta level, it's sort of like us learning how to work with these dynamic forces and tensions and to come to a balance point. And so I think a lot of suffering comes from imbalance. We're all, again, divine creators, and that our healing process is our own and also connected with the collective healing. So I think when we identify as a healer, it's more of a facilitator of others' healing and our own healing. I would never say I heal someone. I think they allow me to, bring in tools to help them heal themselves. But that each person working on themselves also helps the collective heal as well.
What is the meaning of freedom to you? What is to be free from your perspective?
I think being free is the ability to flow your life and your experiences in alignment with what's of the highest and best good and with light. So I think that the freedom to choose in every moment to be in alignment is the ultimate freedom. That doesn't mean that there aren't constraints. Like, I think it's good to, sometimes pull in examples, but you might choose, if you want to be a really fit person, to put yourself under a regimented training schedule so that you can really chisel yourself and become that version of yourself that you want to be. And so it doesn't mean that there aren't ways that you constrain your experience so that you can have particular outcomes. But I think when you get into the right state of consciousness or states of consciousness, there are literally, you're sort of guided to what is the highest and best good in that moment. And so I think the freedom to allow humans to continue to evolve towards their divinity and understanding their own divinity and being creative decision makers and participants is the ultimate freedom.
And my last warm-up question is, at this time, what do you think is the world's greatest need?
I think more people waking up to who they are as divine beings and choosing love and light rather than fear and darkness.
How did you become a writer, and what was the inspiration and also purpose of writing the book, The Parapsychology Revolution?
I would say that this was one of my first major writing projects. I subsequently have written dozens of articles and blogs and interviews and such for various media outlets, but this was very much one of my first major projects and one of the only books I've co-authored or written. So the inspiration came, I met a professor named Dr. Robert Schock at Boston University back in 2003, and my mother had actually given me a book that was authored by Lynn McTaggart called The Field. And in The Field, Lynn McTaggart's a journalist, and she features a number of kind of pioneers in the consciousness space or consciousness research space. And one of them was Edgar Mitchell, for instance, who had an experience in space where he was looking down at planet Earth and had this feeling of oneness. So I read this book, and my mom gave me, and ended up giving it to Dr. Robert Schock, who he had been doing really impressive and interesting research in working with ancient civilizations and using geology and anthropology insights to better understand these civilizations and what might have been ways that they might have been advanced that we don't currently understand. So he had had this experience, and he'd worked in Egypt with the Great Sphinx, and his research helped on the weathering patterns of the Great Sphinx uncovered that. And he developed a theory that the Sphinx was built prior to the Great Pyramids in Giza. I had conversations with him and was doing a directed study and brought him this book. And I don't remember if it was the same day, but he sort of went away and then came back and asked to have a meeting with me. And he just basically was like, let's write a book on this. So that was the genesis of the Parapsychology Revolution.
So talk to me for a moment. Why did you choose to become a healer, and also the kinds of healings you offer?
I have done all of the healings that I offer. So I feel that it's very important for people to have their own experiences with energy healing. And so there's nothing that I offer that I haven't done myself and had an experience with. I feel that there's a lot of information out there on directions that humanity should go to build a better world. So we have, tons of white papers and research papers on how to fix climate change and how to solve poverty and a whole host of other things. But it doesn't seem to fundamentally shift people to orient towards wanting to achieve those goals at a mass level. And so my question, even back for the Parapsychology Revolution, was, can tools beyond our normal senses help facilitate a consciousness evolution on this planet so that we are in alignment with natural and social systems and really truly can bring out a better world. Some of these tools that I offer and that I've been trained to use through the Modern Mystery School primarily, I think are getting at the fundamental root cause and like helping shift dynamics at an energetic level that really help people realign with wanting to participate in a better world.
In some of these tools, or one of these tools is meditation.
Well, I would say the sort of trifecta that I like to talk about and that other teachers and healers in the school like to talk about it, I think prayer, ritual, and meditation.
What kinds of rituals?
What's interesting about rituals is that they can have a long lineage, which tends to kind of increase their vitality. I don't totally understand the mechanism for this, but it does seem that a ritual that's been done over time has a stronger effect than something that you just make up on the fly.
Right.
That being said, I think there's a lot of beautiful rituals that can be created individually to kind of, connect with an experience you're having, or to, do something around manifestation. Or I wouldn't say that rituals need to be rigid, but I do think some of the rituals that are as part of some of the work that I do are part of a long lineage.
You mentioned in your bio that some of these tools that you have used yourself has helped you to tap into the greater sources of energetic connection and understand your purpose. So my question is, when it comes to purpose, how do we know when we are tapping into our purpose and know what that is?
Well, I think the signs are different for everyone, but I love Carl Jung's term serendipity. I think there's events with meaning that start to, if you're paying attention, once you're in alignment with your purpose, you start getting a lot more energy and a lot more resources flowing to you. It's like the lily pads start to appear that you can jump on to get to the next step. And I think when you're out of alignment with your purpose, things feel like you're walking through mud, you feel lower energy, you might have a lot of conflict arise with the people you're around, things like that.
Another thing that you speak of is the accessing our own power, or the power within. So what is power to you? Do you have your own definition of power?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I think we're all, as divine creative beings, there's an inherent, as being part of the divine consciousness that we all exist in, kind of like fish in water. I think we all have, our sort of our birthright or our innate intelligence is there's an innate power that we can all tap into that's never ending. And that's, kind of sitting there latent. People talk about Kundalini experiences and things like that. I think there's ways to awaken that power. I think it can stay dormant with people if they don't do work to unleash it. But I think it's, there's this sort of untapped potential and then later hopefully tapped potential that we all have access to.
Another word that you use, two words together, self-alignment. So you call it even greater self-alignment. What does it mean to be self-aligned?
Yeah, I think that's when you're really experiencing that flow state and when you've got all the systems in your life working for you instead of working against you. So, I think about it in terms of like buckets of an ideal life, your finances, your friends and family, your spiritual life, your home environment, things like that. When all those systems are properly oiled and running, that's when you're in a most alignment with yourself. And when you know what you're going for, what your purpose is, that's when the universe can work with you to help manifest those outcomes.
So what is parapsychology? I never heard about this before.
Many would say it's the formal scientific study around extrasensory perception and psychokinesis. And so it's kind of separate from psychical research, which is more informal and doesn't try to bring some of these phenomena into a laboratory setting to further understand them from a scientific perspective.
So why were you interested in researching this field?
It was primarily because I was as a young person, very interested in environmental issues and helping to bring our relationship with nature back into a balanced state. And so I was an activist in college, and as a teenager and moving into college, I was really primarily interested in land conservation and issues around community development, things like that. And I wondered if telepathy, psychokinesis, some of these other faculties that humans have could be harnessed to help us become aware of what was going on and come together to form solutions in a more rapid way. Like I wanted to accelerate what I feel is an educational process and a coming together that, could be enhanced by some of these tools.
And that brings me to the question of skepticism. Why do you think most of us don't believe or don't even try to understand these extra psychological phenomenon?
There's sort of that many humans are living in states of fear. Understandably, in a lot of cases, we have mass poverty. We have all sorts of war and conflict issues that, from the get-go, a lot of people are born into that state, living in a state of fear, poverty, maybe mental and physical challenges that they face with their families. And so I think fear causes constriction. And I think these phenomena are about expansion and about love and connection. And so if you don't have a lot of that input early on, I think it's difficult to connect the dots, that you're not just living day to day in a constrained way, having to kind of fight for your existence. So in some ways, I think while it's inherent, I think they are faculties that exist with every human being. I think circumstances can temper them and make it difficult to tap into. I do think there are some people that are very gifted that kind of just naturally have the faculties sort of lit up, for lack of a better word. But I think it's like anything else. We have a range of skills in any one area as human beings. And I think most people are kind of in the middle, and then we've got some extraordinary individuals, and we have some people who don't experience anything at all or very little. So yeah, I think there's a lot of fear, and it's sort of like learning a language too. I think if you're not exposed to it when you're younger, your skeptical mind starts tuning, and your critical mind starts turning on at middle school, high school age, and then it becomes more difficult to be open to some of the experiences. From the perspective of modern parapsychological research, there's been very little money put towards studying these phenomenon. Dr. Schock and I talk about this somewhat in the book, or allude to it, but there's, compared to traditional psychology, the amount of money that's gone into parapsychological research is just a drop of a pin. Like there's almost no money that goes into this. So I think, the lack of funding prevents more professionals from going and studying these phenomena in the lab. And so I think that holds the space back a lot as well.
Have you had some ideas to be presented to some people or the government? I'm not sure who to go to, so these researches can be explored more in this country.
Sure. Yeah. My theory of change to some degree is related to the investor community. So I think there's a number of high net worth individuals and people who've had experiences and have money to kind of put towards this kind of research. I'm actually part of an investor network that's interested in consciousness evolution. So interested in investing in technologies and services that advance human consciousness. So I think there's, groups like that could help kind of continue the flow of money to this research.
Yeah. In your book, you say towards the end, telepathy is perhaps the best attested of all psychical phenomena. So talk to me about telepathy and intuition. Are they somehow connected?
Well, I think that you can have intuition without telepathy, but I think they are connected. But that's a great question. I'd have to think a little bit more about how I would fully answer that. But I think intuition kind of arises from your subconscious and conscious mind seeing a lot of patterns and then kind of coming to a flash of insight about a particular situation or individual. And I think a lot of that information can come through your normal senses, and a lot of it can come through other channels. So, for example, I might have a conflict with a friend or, have been like ruminating over something. And then suddenly I realize why we had a conflict. Yeah. It sort of comes to me all at once. And then that person contacts me that day and says, hey, can we talk? And I think in that way, you kind of had an intuition about the situation, but you also had a telepathic experience with the friend.
Another question I have is about mediumship. That is something that has been explored and exposed to many societies. So I'm wondering if that made some people, gave them the seed to dive deeper into these different kinds of abilities that we have. Would you say so?
Well, I think the question of whether we persist after our physical bodies die and what happens to us is a question that is important to every person on this planet. And so I think when we lose a loved one, it can force some people into a questioning, maybe if they hadn't thought about it much before, I think. And then those who are mediums or channel are seen as like a bridge to potentially understanding what could happen after we die and how we could connect with those people we love. So yeah, I think it's an interesting area. I think it's been challenging to bring that into a laboratory setting. I think this goes to a point I wanted to make in general, that a lot of these phenomenon are personal in the sense that you have an emotional connection to a person or an object or an experience, and it's hard to formulate that when you're put into a laboratory setting and asked to do it over and over again.
Yeah.
And so I think the same with mediumship, that there's been a lot of skepticism about the outcomes of those experiments or sittings because they have a variety of different outcomes. And it's hard to say whether it was telepathy, whether it was fraud, and it's hard to replicate the same outcomes over and over.
What about out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences? They could become a lab material for parapsychology?
There's an excellent neuroscientist who wrote several books that I would highly recommend on out-of-body experiences. He does the best job of anyone I've ever seen in collecting these stories from people who have had out-of-body experiences, and it's called Proof of Heaven. Again, though, I think it's tough to bring those into a laboratory setting. I think the best we can do for now, at least from my understanding, is to collect experiences from people. It's called spontaneous psi, SPSI, like similar to what Louisa Rhine did back in the 1930s and 40s. She collected dream experiences from all over the world into a catalog, and that sort of became its own database that people could learn from. But to try to get everyone into a laboratory, have them go to sleep, and try to test whether they had a telepathic or clairvoyant experience while dreaming is pretty challenging.
So after the research that you have done with Dr. Robert, what evidences have you found, uncovered?
Well, I think that some of the most compelling evidence came from the work of J.B. and Louisa Rhine back in the early 20th century. They were at Duke University and they did dice throwing and card guessing experiments, thousands and thousands of trials, and found that there was a statistically significant, impact that people have on guessing cards and also on intending which dice will land. And then the Pear Laboratory at Princeton University ran for 30 years, I believe. And they did thousands and thousands of trials to look at using random event generators to get people to choose either 0 or 1s to influence the machine to have the outcome of 0 or 1s more than it would just happen by chance. So I think those are kind of the best experimental evidence. There's also been a lot of great work done through ions in Northern California and Petaluma, I believe. Dean Radin has done some amazing work with some of his studies. I think he's run numerous Gansfeld experiments, which is a telepathy experiment. And there's also the work of Rupert Sheldrake with animals, which I think is really compelling because, as we mentioned in the book, animals have less of a tendency to lie. Yes, and so, he did an experiment looking at whether dogs knew when their owners were going to come home ahead of time, and found that there was a significant statistical influence there. So, those are kind of some of the highlights, but I'm sure there's other experiments happening that I'm not aware of because it has been a long time since I looked at the data.
Thank you so much, Logan, for the exploration of these fields of study and the way you have also opened up yourself to explore your own consciousness.
Thank you so much for having me.
I do have a few more questions, the ending questions. Would you like to add anything or read a passage from anything that you have written that can support the conversation?
I would just like to say that it's really important to stay open and to keep searching and to set the intention to be in alignment. And I think from there, if you're really asking for help and for connection, if you pay attention, the universe will start conspiring to help you.
3 questions, ending questions. How do you define success these days? What is to be successful to you?
I think being successful is being in service, in alignment with your purpose. So I think with the intention of helping humanity evolve towards its highest good and taking care of yourself within that so that you can be and show up in the best way possible.
If you knew you would die soon, meaning losing the body, would you make any change in your life or do anything in a different way?
I would probably spend less time at the computer and be more in my body. I think just more physical experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, that resonates. I often think about that. Why am I here? Well, I have a purpose. But being close to nature, right? In my case.
Yeah, same here. Spend more time outdoors and being with nature and slowing down and really being more present and paying attention as much as I can.
And the last question is, what are 3 things about life you know for sure as of this moment?
That consciousness is infinite, that we are all in this together, and that it's really important to laugh at the whole thing.
I agree. Yes. That makes me laugh just by thinking about it. That's funny. Yes. Oh my God, Logan. Yes. Thank you so much for your beautiful presence, authentic presence, for everything that you do, the awareness you have of your own purpose and everything between. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Where can we find more information about you, your books, products, services, and future projects?
Great. I have 2 websites. One is my consulting website, which is LoganYonavjak.com. And then my healing website where all of my healings and teachings are offered is self-alignment.org.
Wonderful. I'll have those links on your podcast profile too. Thank you so much again, and we'll talk soon.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Logan Yonavjak and her work, please visit LoganYonavjak.com.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.